Hey guys, it's Mr. Ryan, Mr. Bell. So today, I first of all want to hope you guys are all doing well. I know this has been a big adjustment for a lot of people, and I know it's not easy on everybody. So we appreciate you guys staying with us and working through all the different activities everybody's putting up. Today, I'm going to read a short story called "A Pair of Silk Stockings" by Kate Chopin. You can look up and follow along. It's for free online. Katechopin, Kate Chopin, pronounced Chopin. And it's a story about a woman who comes into a little bit of money and uses it to treat herself for the day. So I'm going to ask you guys some questions at the end. But first, I just want you to think about difference between right and wrong, and also what it means to do something good and what it costs a person to do something good that might not be money, might just be their time or their well-being. So think about that, as well as how you might have played out this situation if you were in her shoes. So we got A Pair of Silk Stockings by Kate Chopin. I'm going to go a little quick so I can get this video onto IG Live. So here we go. Little Mrs. Summers one day found herself the unexpected possessor of $15. It seemed to her a very large amount of money, and the way in which it stuffed and bulged her worn old porte-monnaie wallet gave her a feeling of importance such as she had not enjoyed for years. The question of investment was one that occupied her greatly. For a day or two she walked about, apparently in a dreamy state, but really absorbed in speculation and calculation. She did not wish to act hastily, to do anything she might afterward regret, but it was during the still hours of the night, when she lay awake revolving her plans in her mind, that seemed to her way clearly toward a proper and judicious use of the money. $1 or two should be added to the price usually paid for Janie's shoes, which would ensure their lasting an appreciable time longer than they usually did. She would buy so and so many yards of percale for new shirt-waists and for the boys and Janie and Mag. She intended to make the old ones do by skillfully patching. Mag should have another gown. She had seen some beautiful patterns, veritable bargains in the shop windows, and still there would be enough left for new stockings, 2 pairs apiece. What darning this would save her for a while. She would get caps for the boys and sailor hats for the girls. The vision of her little brood looking fresh and dainty and new for once in their lives excited her and made her restless and wakeful with anticipation. The neighbors sometimes talked of certain better days that little Mrs. Summers had known before she had ever thought of being Mrs. Summers. She herself indulged in no such morbid retrospection. She had no time, no second of time, to devote to the past. The needs of the present absorbed her every faculty. A vision of the future, like some dim, gaunt monster, sometimes appalled her. But luckily, tomorrow never comes. Mrs. Summers was one who knew the value of bargains, who could stand for hours making her way inch by inch toward the desired object that was selling below cost. She could elbow her way if need be. She had learned to clutch a piece of goods and hold on to it and stick to it with persistence and determination till her turn came to be served, no matter when it came. But that day she was a little faint and tired. She had swallowed a late luncheon. No, when she came to think of it, between getting children fed, the right place, and the place righted, and preparing herself for a shopping bout, she had actually forgotten to eat any luncheon at all. She sat herself upon the revolving stool before a counter that was comparatively deserted, trying to gather her strength and courage to charge through an eager multitude that was besieging breastworks of shirting and figured lawn. An all-gone limp feeling had come over her, and she rested her hand aimlessly upon the counter. She wore no gloves. By degrees she grew aware that her hand had encountered something very soothing, very pleasant to touch. She looked down to see that her hand lay upon a pile of silk stockings. A placard nearby announced that they had been reduced in price from $2.50 down to $1.98, and a young girl who stood behind the counter asked her if she wished to examine their line of silk hosiery. She smiled, just as if she had been asked to inspect a tiara of diamonds with the ultimate view of purchasing it. But She went on feeling the soft, sheeny, luxurious things with both hands now, holding them up to see them glisten and to feel them glide serpent like through her fingers. Two hectic blotches came suddenly to her pale cheeks. She looked at the girl. Do you think there are any in eights and a half among these? There were a number of eights and a half among these. In fact, there were more of that size than any other. Here a light blue pair, there a lavender, and some all black, and various shades of gray and tan. Mrs. Summers selected a black pair and looked at them very closely. She pretended to be examining their texture, which the clerk assured her was excellent. $1.98, she mused aloud. Well, I'll take this pair. She handed the girl a $5 bill and waited for her change and for the parcel. What a very small parcel it was. It seemed to be lost in the depths of her shabby shopping bag. Mrs. Summers, after that, did not move in the direction of the bargain counter. She took the elevator, which carried her to an upper floor into the region of the ladies' waiting rooms. Here, in a retired corner, she exchanged her cotton stockings for new silk ones, which she had just bought. She was not going through any acute mental process or reasoning with herself, nor was she trying to explain to her satisfaction the motive of her action. She was not thinking at all. She seemed for the time to be taking a rest from that laborious and fatiguing function, and to have abandoned herself to some mechanical impulse that directed her actions and freed her of responsibility. How good was the touch of raw silk to her flesh! She felt like lying back in the cushioned chair, reveling for a while in the luxury of it. She did for a little while. Then she replaced her shoes, rolled the cotton stockings together, and thrust them into her bag. After doing this, she crossed straight over to the shoe department and took her seat to be fitted. She was fastidious. The clerk would not make her out. He could not reconcile her shoes with her stockings, and she was not too easily pleased. When she held back her skirts and turned her foot one way and her head the other as she glanced down at the polished, pointed-tipped boots, her foot and ankle looked very pretty. She could not realize that they belonged to her, and they were part of herself. She wanted an excellent and stylish fit, she told the young fellow who had served her. She did not mind the difference of $1 or $2 in price, so long as she got what she desired. It was a long time since Mrs. Summers had been fitted with gloves. On rare occasions when she had bought a pair, they were always bargains, so cheap that it would have been preposterous and unreasonable to have expected to be fitted to the hand. Now she rested her elbow on the cushion of the glove counter, and a pretty, pleasant young creature, delicate and deft of touch, drew a long-wristed kid over Mrs. Summers' hand. She smoothed it down over the wrist and buttoned it neatly. Both lost themselves for a second or two, admiring contemplation of the little symmetrical gloved hand. But there were other places where money might be spent. There were books and magazines piled in the windows of a stall a few paces down the street. Mrs. Summers bought 2 high-priced magazines, such as she had been accustomed to reading in the days when she had been accustomed to other pleasant things. She carried them without wrappings. As well as she could, she lifted her skirts at the crossings. Her stockings and boots, well-fitting gloves, and worked marvelously in her bearing, and had given her a feeling of assurance, a sense of belonging in the well-dressed multitude. She was very hungry. Another time she would have styled the cravings for food until reaching her own house, where she would have brewed herself a fresh cup of coffee and taken a snack of anything that was available, but the impulse that was guiding her would not suffer her to entertain such a thought. There was a restaurant at the corner. She had never entered its doors from the outside. She had sometimes caught glimpses of spotless damask and shining crystal and soft-stepping waiters serving people of fashion. When she entered, her appearance created no surprise, no consternation, as she had half feared it might. She seated herself at a small table alone, and an attractive waiter at once approached her to take her order. She did not want a profusion. She craved a nice and tasty bite, a half dozen blue points, a plump chop with cress, and something sweet, a creme frappe, for instance, a glass of Rhine wine, and afterward a small cup of black coffee. While waiting to be served, she removed her gloves leisurely and laid them beside her. Then she picked up a magazine and glanced through it, cutting the pages with the blunt edge of her knife. It was all very agreeable. The damask was even more spotless than it had seemed through the window, and the crystal more sparkling. There were quiet ladies and gentlemen who did not notice her lunching at the small tables like her own. A soft, pleasing strain of music could be heard, and a gentle breeze was blowing through the window. She tasted a bite, and she read a word or two. She sipped the amber wine and wiggled her toes in the silk stockings. The price made no difference. She counted the money to the waiter and left an extra coin on his tray, whereupon he bowed before her as before a princess of royal blood. There was still money in her purse, and her next temptation presented itself in the shape of a matinee show poster. It was a little later when she entered the theater. The play had begun. The house seemed to her to be packed. But there were vacant seats here, there, and into one of them she ushered between brilliantly dressed women who had gone there to kill time and eat candy and display their gaudy attire. There were many others who were there solely for the play and acting. It is safe to say that there was no one present who bore quite the attitude which Miss Summers did to her surroundings. She gathered in the whole, stage and players and people, in one wide impression, and absorbed it and enjoyed it. She laughed at the comedy and wept. She and the gaudy women next to her wept over the tragedy, and they talked a little together over it, and the gaudy woman wiped her eyes and sniffled on a tiny square of filmy perfumed lace and passed it to Mrs. Summers, her box of candy. The play was over, the music ceased, and the crowd filed out. It was like a dream ended. People scattered in all directions. Mrs. Summers went to the corner and waited for a cable car. A man with keen eyes who sat opposite her seemed to like the study of her small, pale face. It puzzled him to decipher what he saw there. In truth, he saw nothing, unless he were wizard enough to detect a poignant wish, a powerful longing that the cable car would never stop anywhere, but go on and on with that forever with her in it. So that's a pair of silk stockings. Basically, it's about a woman who takes a day for herself, has a little bit of extra money, and instead of spending it on her kids, goes out to see a show, has a little bit of lunch, buys herself a new outfit. So what I want to ask you guys first is, what would you have done with the money? Think about what you would do with a little extra money, and I also want you to think about whether or not she was right or wrong to do what she did, to buy the stockings and to buy the gloves and to go to the restaurant. Was that the right thing, or should she have used it on something else? Whatever you think she should have done, I want to know why. But that's all I've got for you guys. I really hope you guys are staying safe. I really hope you guys are okay. Feel free to reach out to me at rbell@oxfordasd.org, or you can reach out to any of us through the Star's Instagram or through any of our emails, phone numbers, whatever you have. But thanks so much, guys, and I hope you're doing all right.